Hello and welcome back. Today we'll discover more about modulators with some simple examples. You already know about two modulators, envelopes and LFOs. Most anything that outputs a signal could be used as a modulation source. And if you're not already convinced, most anything in the modular world can be turned upside down with the use of modulators. Let's get right to it then. Once again, let's look at what modulators are. We see that they have been used to generate modulation signals. Modulation signals that are used to modulate other modules. Sometimes they take an input signal, as in the VCA example. That input signal can sometimes be audio or control signals. Some modulators do not have an input signal, like our LFO. Usually there is a control signal input that will be used to change what the modulator is doing, but not all circuits will have that either. But that won't make them any less useful. Here we have a Pittsburgh modular toolbox. At the top we have a glide circuit. The input can be our pitch CV from our keyboard controller. The glide output is patched to our VCO. This output will still be our pitch CV, except that when we change a note, the note changes no longer instantaneously. Depending on where the knob is set, it can take a long time. Next, the sample and hold circuit. Sample and hold can look at any incoming signal. When we send a trigger signal at the control input, the circuit will capture the voltage at that point in time and send the sampled voltage to the output. The signal input can be simple, like LFOs. For this example, we'll send a slow LFO triangle wave to the signal input so you can see what it's doing. I'll use the gate on my keyboard controller for the control input. Every time the control input gets a trigger, it will sample the voltage of whatever is at the signal input and hold it there until another trigger is sent. You can see that our triangle wave is now a series of stepped voltages, or more customary to see noise audio as the input. This module already has a noise circuit built in, and its noise is normalized to the sample and hold input. This normalization is broken when we plug another signal to the input jack. So I'll remove the LFO from the signal input, and now the noise circuit will be the input. Sending triggers from my keyboard controller. We have now a random waveform output. Random waveform into the VCO FM input. Alternatively, we could send it to a filter. Let the gate signals of your sequencer randomize the filter cutoff for each note in the sequence. Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto. At the bottom of the module is the inverter. The inverter will flip the polarity of a signal. If it's plus 1 volt, the output will be minus 1 volt. If it's a ramp wave going up or down, the output will be the opposite. This in and of itself is not very interesting, but if we send an envelope signal, which is usually a positive polarity, the inverter will transform it into a negative waveform. We can modulate the filter output that way, and it has a very different sound. Here's a much more interesting use of the inverter. First, let's think of how we have any VCO waveform. Signal number 1, we send it to a mixer just as it is. We use a mult to take a copy of that waveform. Whoa, wait, time out. What, pray tell, is a mult? Mult is short for multiple, and this is a utility module that takes any input signal and outputs multiple copies of it. There are two kinds. Passive multiple is just a basic signal splitter. It doesn't use any active circuitry, use any power, and therefore they're usually cheaper. The buffered multiple, on the other hand, requires power and uses active buffer circuitry to ensure each output copy signal is accurate and strong. Buffered multiples are better for handling pitch CVs and any signals that require precision. Today I'm using a buffered multiple in this example. Signal number 1, we send it to a mixer just as it is. We use a mult to take a copy of that waveform, send signal number 2 to the inverter to the mixer as well. The result is the waveform cancels out, leaving us with silence. Let's say we send the signal number 1 to a filter first. Here I'm using my JU60 VCO. Then to the mixer. If the mixer levels are set just right, what happens is it cancels out the low pass portion of the frequencies, leaving only the high pass signal. In this way you can change any low pass filter signal to a high pass. Just be aware that some filter module outputs may already be inverted by the nature of their circuits, so you might not need to use an inverter for this to work. Similarly, you can use the method to change high pass to low pass, and even change a bandpass filter signal to a notch filter type. Here I have Modular, an excellent ring modulator circuit. I won't go into detail about how ring mod circuits function, just know that they can take two signal inputs and the ring mod will modulate the signals together in a special way. I like to send two VCOs. Their frequencies very close to each other but not quite. But you don't have to use audio every time. Say one of the signals is simply a gate. I'll take the gate output from my keyboard controller. What happens, the ring mod will gate the incoming audio from the VCO. So now all of a sudden the ring mod is being used as a gated VCA? Yep, and that's the beauty of modular synthesis. You have seen some wild stuff. VCOs can become LFOs. Self-resonant filters can be audio sources. VCAs can be used as modulation. Low-pass filters can be used as high-pass if you have the inverter. And now modulations like ring mod can be used as VCAs. But we're just getting started. In modular, we often make feeble attempts to squeeze the most out of every horizontal pitch unit of our rack. Buying modules can get expensive, and always the need for more space in our racks. Often, it can be desirable to cram as much value and function into a single module as possible. Enter the function generator. So far, we have been looking at the very dedicated modules that make very specific kinds of signals. VCOs, LFOs, envelopes, glide circuit. Function generators, on the other hand, can output a variety of modulation signals. Pittsburgh Modular Toolbox is that kind of idea, but something more like make noise mass. Now there's a real function generator. It's one of the most popular modules out there. It can behave like an envelope, LFO, slew limiter, inverter, lag, portamento, signal summing, and it just goes on, depending on how it gets patched and the way you want to use it. There's just too much to go into detail here today, but just be aware these kinds of uber modulators are out there. Well, that's a quick intro into modulators. In my next video in this series, we'll break into the world of effects. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe.